The dinner table went quiet the second I set down my fork. My sister had just said it, loud enough for the whole restaurant to hear. Well, at least I found a husband before I turned 30. Some of us are still waiting, right, Mara? And my mother laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and honest, the kind you can't fake even if you tried. That laugh broke something in me that I didn't know was still whole. I was 35 years old, sitting in my childhood family's favorite restaurant, listening to my own mother laugh at the idea that I was some tragic, lonely woman nobody wanted. And for one long, humiliating second, I let them believe it. I let the silence sit there. I let my sister smirk. I let my mother wipe a tear of laughter from the corner of her eye. Then I put my napkin down, looked at both of them, and said the words that changed everything in that room. I've been married for 6 years. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did too. I sat with it for 6 years before I ever said it out loud to my family. My name is Mara. I grew up in a house where love was never given freely. It was earned, measured, compared. My sister Danielle was the golden child. Homecoming queen, married at 24 to a man my parents adored, a big church wedding with 300 guests and a slideshow of her childhood photos set to music. I remember standing in the back of that reception hall, clapping for her, genuinely happy for her, while some quiet part of me wondered when it would be my turn to matter that much. It never came. Not because I didn't have a life. I did. I had a whole life my family knew nothing about, and that was exactly the problem. I had built it that way, brick by brick, without realizing I was also building a wall. Growing up, my mother had one measuring stick for a daughter's worth, and it was a wedding ring. She didn't ask about my career, the promotion I'd worked 80-hour weeks for, the apartment I'd bought on my own in a city where I knew no one. She asked, every single phone call, any men in your life? And when the answer was no, or when I didn't answer at all, I could hear the disappointment sitting in the silence on her end of the line. So I stopped sharing things. That's the part nobody warns you about. When a family makes you feel small for who you are, you don't fight back right away. You just quietly disappear from the parts of your life they don't approve of. You edit yourself down to whatever version keeps the peace. I met my husband, David, on a rainy Tuesday in a bookstore that doesn't exist anymore. He was reaching for the same worn copy of a novel I'd been eyeing for weeks, and he handed it to me instead of taking it for himself. Small moment. Everything started there. We fell in love slowly, carefully, the way two people do when they've both been quietly burned before. He never once asked me to prove myself to him. That alone felt like a foreign language after a lifetime of feeling like I had to earn my place at my own family's table. We got married in a small ceremony by a lake, just 22 people, most of them his family and our closest friends. I didn't invite my parents. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I've turned it over in my mind 1,000 times since. But by the time David proposed, I had spent years absorbing the quiet message that my life, my choices, my relationships weren't worth celebrating unless they fit some picture my mother had already painted in her head. I was terrified that if I brought David into that world, they would find some way to shrink him too. Shrink us. The way they'd shrunk every part of me that didn't look like Danielle's life. So I kept it separate. I told myself it was protecting something sacred. Some days I believed that. Other days, late at night, I knew it was really just fear wearing a braver costume. For 6 years, I lived 2 lives. On weekends, I was Mara, wife of David, gardening in our backyard, laughing over burnt pancakes, building a home filled with quiet, steady love nobody had to perform for. And once a month, I drove 3 hours to my parents' house and became a different Mara. Single, still looking, the punchline at dinner, the cautionary tale my mother used to remind Danielle how lucky she was. I told myself I was strong enough to carry both versions. I wasn't. Every laugh at my expense chipped away at something. Every "don't worry, honey, someone will come along eventually" for my mother felt like a slow, repeated wound. I started dreading family dinners the way you dread a dentist appointment you know is going to hurt. The night everything changed started like every other dinner. Same restaurant, same booth, same tired jokes. Danielle was 7 months pregnant with her second child, glowing, and my mother spent 20 minutes describing the nursery she'd helped decorate. Then, somewhere between the appetizers and the entree, Danielle turned to me with that smile she always used right before she said something cruel disguised as a joke. So Mara, 35 and still single. Any prospects, or should we start looking into freezing your eggs? And my mother laughed. That was the moment, not the comment itself. I'd absorbed worse over the years. But that laugh, that easy, careless laugh from the one person who was supposed to protect me from the world, not join in on hurting me, I felt my whole body go still. 6 years of silence rose up in my chest like a wave I could no longer hold back. I've been married for 6 years, I said. The table went dead silent. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Danielle blinked like I'd spoken a different language. What did you just say? My mother asked, her voice suddenly small. I got married 6 years ago, by the lake at Miller's Point. His name is David. We have a house together, a life together. A whole life, nothing about, because every time I tried to bring it near you, I watched you find something wrong with it before I even finished the sentence. My mother's face went through about 5 emotions in 10 seconds. Shock, disbelief, something that almost looked like hurt, and then, unmistakably, anger. 6 years? You've been lying to us for 6 years? I wasn't lying, I said, and my voice shook, but I didn't stop. I was protecting something good from people who never learned how to be happy for me unless it matched a picture in their head. Every time I opened up about my life, it got picked apart, so I stopped opening up. That's not a lie, Mom. That's self-preservation. Danielle sat frozen, one hand on her stomach, and for the first time in years, I saw something other than smugness on her face, something closer to guilt. My mother's eyes filled with tears, and for a second, I braced myself for more laughter, more dismissal. Instead, she whispered, "Why didn't you want us there?" And that question cracked something open in me, because underneath all my anger, I realized the truth. I hadn't just been protecting my marriage from judgment. I had been protecting myself from finally admitting how much their approval still mattered to me, even after everything. Because I was scared, I admitted. Scared you'd find a way to make the happiest day of my life feel small, the way you've made so many other things feel small. I didn't want to watch that happen to this too. Nobody said anything for a long moment. The restaurant noise around us kept going, oblivious, while our little corner of the world sat in silence, rearranging itself. Then my mother reached across the table, took my hand, and said the words I had waited my whole adult life to hear. "I'm sorry. I didn't know I was making you feel like you had to hide the best parts of yourself from me." It wasn't a perfect ending, and it didn't erase 6 years of silence in one dinner. But it was a beginning. In the months that followed, I introduced David to my parents properly. Nervous, cautious, but honest. My mother cried when she saw our wedding photos. Danielle, to her credit, apologized too, in her own imperfect way. And slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding something more honest than what we'd had before. Looking back now, I understand something I wish someone had told me years earlier. You can spend your whole life trying to earn love by hiding the parts of yourself people might not immediately approve of, but real love was never meant to be earned that way. It was never meant to require an audition. I stopped believing my worth was measured by a wedding ring the day I realized the people I was performing for weren't the people who actually loved me best. My husband never once asked me to prove I deserved him. It took my family's laughter and my own 6 years of silence to finally understand that the love you have to hide isn't something broken. Sometimes it's something so real, you're just scared of what the world might do if they got their hands on it too soon. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own silence, your own quiet strength, subscribe, because there are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told, and I promise you are not alone in any of it.